Chapter 2, book discussion with Miss Watson and Miss Durgan.
Welcome, the evening edition. Today we are going to discuss Chapter 2, Fire on the Mountain. We're going to give a quick summary of what happened in the chapters and then do a deep dive into
Chapter 2.
Literary devices,
Symbolism.
All right. So, in the beginning of Chapter 2, we have Ralph blowing the conch shell to gather all the different boys together, and we see that the conch has become this powerful symbol of everyone kind of coming together.
So they gather and they make a couple more rules, mostly the rule that whoever's holding the conch gets to talk. In this meeting, they talk about what their plans are for the island, like let's have fun, but like also probably gonna get rescued. At one point, this little boy with a birthmark's like, hey, I want to talk, and he says,
I think there's a beastie here. And so he brings it to their attention. He has seen a beastie, which is like British for monster, lurking around on the island. He said he's seen around and that can't be possible. There is no beastie. The rest of the boys, especially Jack, is not so sure. So Jack says, we will hunt the beastie. We will hunt it down and take care of it if it's... Jack is mostly concerned with hunting, whereas Ralph is mostly concerned with building a fire, and since he is declared chief, he gets it all hustle up the mountain and start building a fire at the top.
Yep, and then Piggy is all like, okay, guys, like, wait a second, you're acting like a bunch of kids, and then but then he still, like, follows them up there. They start building this big fire, and, they were enjoying themselves, because they apparently was super fun, but then they get the whole thing built, and they realize that nobody knows how to actually light a fire. So
they see rambling up top of the mountain, and they get this idea to steal his glasses, spec, as they call it, use his glasses to start the fire, which then, due to a number of reasons, for entirely out of control, burns down a good the island, and I don't know too far, but because of that fire, they realize that one of the boys, the boy with the mulberry birthmark, has gone missing and is potentially
dead. He's probably dead.
Yeah.
Because Piggy talks about how he had been playing in the part of the part of the island where the fire was. So but this is also interesting at the very end as a good transition into talking about some of the symbolism and stuff. On page 46, it says, a tree exploded in the fire like a bomb. Tall swaths of creepers rose for a moment into view, agonized, and went down again. The little boys screamed at them, snakes, snakes, look at the snakes. So, again, they're seeing these, like, creepers, and they're thinking they look like snakes, which may be what the beastie was at the beginning, right? All those little boys are maybe imagining things, maybe not.
And all in all, in Chapter 2, we see the total transformation or partial transformation from the island being this nice, beautiful paradise to something that they call unfriendly. We see more shadows, we see more creepy things, and towards the end, they refer to it as the unfriendly side of the mountain, and they end with this kind of creepy drum roll sound. So, sort of ominous, to use a word of the day. So going back to the beginning of the chapter, maybe we can do a quick breakdown of what we noticed when we were reading. I did annotations.
Yes. I have my leftover annotations from, I want to say this was like 2014 that I did this one, but maybe a little after that. the first thing that happens in that very first paragraph is actually one of the questions from this week, which was asking about the difference between the choir boys from their first meeting to this meeting. And it says, the choir, noticeably less of a group, had discarded their cloaks. So it's a small thing, but it can symbolize a lot. So it also talked about, right before that, it said most of the children, feeling too late this smart of sunburn, had put their clothes on. So they had been naked, or maybe mostly naked, maybe, I don't know, hanging out.
Shirtless.
Got a bunch of sunburns, and they're like, this is, okay, now this isn't fun anymore, I'm putting my clothes back on. The choir boys, on their hand, took their cloaks off. And at the beginning, from chapter 1, remember when we first saw them on the beach, they were kind of walking down the beach in 2 straight lines. And that's very super ego-y because they're still conforming to these societal rules from school. They've taken off those cloaks, symbolically shedding that those rules, and it says they are noticeably less of a group. So,
can I make a quick connection, Miss Watson?
Yes, you may.
So I was reading this and noticing that at first, when they were shedding all of their school uniforms and cloaks, that it was super fun and they were having the best time ever on this island. But then eventually they kind of missed the routine of it, maybe?
Yeah.
And I was sort of connecting it to our remote learning situation. I felt like I talked to a lot of kids this week who said, like, the first week was so fun and different and exciting, but this week they're sort of missing school as usual. I just thought it was an interesting connection.
They totally miss our rules and regulations.
They just miss being in class all the time.
Yeah, they miss telling them to take turns talking.
Yeah.
Totally.
Actually,
which they're also doing on the island with the conch shell, taking turns.
Yeah, we have to take turns. They make a reference to that. Sorry for the beep in the background. Pizza.
Ooh.
Yes, okay. Let's see. One thing I noticed in chapter 2 is for id, ego, superego, I feel like Jack is being extremely impulsive and animalistic, really focusing. Ruff is focusing on the order and like turns, Bill. And Piggy is also extremely focused on the rules. Let's say the conch shell, we have taken turns. He hyper fixates on it, and he like really wants to follow those rules and wants everyone else to follow them too.
Yep, acting like a bunch of kids. And then Miss Durgan, you brought up in one of our other attempts to film this that on the bookmark which I actually don't have with me, but that talks about ego as being the thing that kind of moderates between the two. So that's Ralph is a great example of that, trying to kind of moderate between Piggy's like extreme rule following and Jack's like other side, like I'm not going to follow the rules. So Ralph's kind of trying to navigate between the two of them. Oh, Mr. You froze. She froze for a second.
Did I freeze? Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you, yeah.
Tricky. Yeah. Jack really wants to follow rules, but he also wants to really brilliant them. He says everyone will have to follow, and if they don't, then like hinting that maybe he would do something.
He's gonna punish them. Yep. But that's just like him being like, ooh, I want the rear to be rules so that I can do something to somebody who breaks the rules. Which is almost... Oh, no. Oh, is that you? Hold on. My phone and my computer and stuff. My friends, somebody was trying to FaceTime me. Okay.
Sorry, guys. We will work this out for next week. We'll get better at this.
Yes, we will. Yes, we will. So just like a good transition, not a good transition, just like a little note about imagery. I just really liked the description of the fire. It's one of the things that I noticed about William Golding and the way he writes is when he has these really descriptive things, he has these giant paragraphs, which sometimes can be hard to follow. But on page 44, Big Fire, it talks about just the way that it describes it. It says, the flames, as though they were a kind of wildlife, crept as a jaguar creeps on its belly towards a line of birch-like saplings that fledged an outcrop of the pink rock. And I just like the way that they describe the fire like an animal, and it really kind of makes it feel creepy.
Absolutely. And similarly, I was noticing that as the chapter went on, it went from these beautiful descriptions.
Sorry, you see my face? Sorry.
That's okay. It goes from these really beautiful descriptions of the island to kind of eerie, creepy. There was one point, I forget where it was, but it's talking about kind of the shadows that are passing Ralph's face, and also the long tangle of fair hair. At the beginning, they just talk about his fair hair. Now, the hair is kind of becoming unruly and long, and it's bothering him. So I feel like paying attention to the setting, changing from positive to negative as we go along, paying attention to clothing, which goes from crisp British schoolboy uniforms to being kind of like dirty, torn, bedraggled, shabby clothes.
Shabby. That's a throwback word of the day.
Throwback to September. And also kind of paying attention to their hair, because they don't really bring up time, but their hair gets longer and longer as we go through the book.
Yes.
Kind of marks time.
One of the things that I want to point out is like, so on page 40, nope, not 43, page 39, at the very bottom, they're talking about them, they're climbing up the mountain and stuff, and it says, they're adding wood to the fire. It says, at the return, Ralph found himself alone on a limb with Jack, and they grinned at each other, sharing this burden. Once more, amid the breeze, the shouting, the slanting sunlight on the high mountain was shed that glamour, that strange invisible light of friendship, adventure, and content. So here they're like kind of having fun building this fire. They're like, we're out in the woods doing cool stuff, and really enjoying each other's friendship. So again, in this our like fourth iteration of this discussion, but one of the had talked, Miss Sturgeon and I talked earlier, I mentioned Jack's attempt to be good friends with Ralph. He really wants Ralph to think he's cool. He volunteers to watch the fire. And I think he's jealous of Piggy, which I think is why he's so mean to him.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting take on it, too, that he's actually kind of jealous of Piggy because Ralph pays attention to him. So he kind of becomes a bully to him.
Yep.
Another moment, which I don't know if we fully addressed. I mean, we talked about it in the summary, that the boys steal Piggy's glasses from off of his face. And talk about impulsive, lack of concern for others. They don't ask him for his glasses. They just kind of surround him and snatch him off his face, which I think starts the process of Piggy getting really, really frustrated with them. In the words of Piggy, he just wants them, or he's saying they're acting like a crowd of kids, and he's sort of this parent figure. He's trying his best to keep track of the little ones. What's that?
He's the mom.
He's the mom. We talked about that in another conversation that we tried to record, that he's sort of like the mom figure. He's trying to keep track of all the little kids running around. He's trying to count them, take care of them, make sure that they take turns. And in exchange, they kind of tackle him to the damn ground and steal his glasses.
And in a kind of darker twist on that, one of the symbols that I notice that comes up in the book a lot and starts to kind of come up in this chapter is the concept of darkness. And so, it being scary, right? The boy saw the beastie at night. They kind of descend into darkness as the fire goes out and as it turns to night. And could think about Piggy without his glasses as kind of being in the dark, right? He's really can't see. And if you are somebody, myself, like me, when you are not, and I think you too, Mr. Ergen, like when you don't have, you can't see, it's really scary. So there's a lot of connections in this book between times when it's dark and the boys being scared. So think about that as you read further.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that comes up is when they do get the fire lit, rather than being scared or worried, they're excited. They're like, "Oh, sweet, we lit this fire," and they start dancing. And dancing will also come up again later in the book, and it's kind of like when they start to lose control of those rules and lose control of order. They have these kind of wild dances. So I think that's interesting to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm. I was just trying to find a part. My favorite character in this book is Simon, and he is just, I just find him to be a very kind character. So Piggy, it says, in page 42 at the top, it says, Piggy had settled himself in a space between two rocks and sat with a conch on his knees. We haven't made a fire, he said. What's any use? We couldn't keep a fire like that going, not if we tried. A fat lot you tried, said Jack contemptuously. You just sat. We used his specs, said Simon, smearing a black cheek with his forearm. He helped that way. So Simon's trying to, like, stand up for Piggy. And Simon has this kind of, like, somehow managed to get this kind of status because they chose him to come on their adventure, like their first adventure to explore the island, and he theoretically already knows Jack because he's part of the choir, right? He's at the very, very beginning, easy to miss, he fainted at the start. So that's Simon's kind of consistently, he's standing up for Piggy in that moment, which is one of the reasons I like him.
Mm-hmm. In that moment, I kind of wish Piggy had realized that Simon was standing up for him more. I kind of wished that they had taken that opportunity to, like, befriend each other and kind of become allies.
Yeah. Yep. So, yeah, this chapter ends with a little bit of darkness because they lose one of their members. I mean, they don't know, because Piggy wasn't able to collect all the boys' names and they don't exactly know how many of there are. They weren't really sure that they were all there on top of the mountain. So that's how that boy got lost in the fire. They were thinking with their id and not thinking about the consequences of the fire and making sure that everybody was safe before they lit the fire.
And so at the end of the chapter, Piggy, I think, is on the brink of an asthma attack because he's so stressed and so concerned for the loss of this boy. And it describes it as the crowd was as silent as death.
Ooh.
Which I think is really eerie. And I think that is one of the places where they hint, or the author hints, that this boy with the birthmark has died, because he never says it outright, but they all kind of know that that's what happened, and are maybe feeling a little guilt at this point.
Yep.
And then the last line of that chapter is, beneath them, on the unfriendly side of the mountain, the drum roll continued. Ooh. So it's interesting, at the beginning of the chapter, it begins with Ralph saying, this is a good island. All we need to do is just have fun until we're rescued. And then at the end of the chapter, after they've had one of their own die in a fire, it's now the unfriendly side.
Totally unfriendly. The island itself is its own symbol. It almost its own character.
So, anything else we want to add? That was pretty good.
I feel like that's it.
Summary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the end of that chapter, if you will.
Yes. And next week, on to Huts on the Beach.
Yay. Before I stop recording, should we tell our audience whether we're doing a book discussion on Monday like we did this week?
Oh, that seems like it could be a good idea.
Okay. Look forward to that on Monday, and we'll see you soon.
We'll see you then. All right. Bye.
Bye.